The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the National Conference of State Legislatures webinar, The Next Wave of Energy Efficiency, hosted by the NCSL Energy Program. My name is Glenn Anderson. I am the Energy Program Director here at NCSL, and I'll be moderating today's webinar, which will be addressing the cost-effective next-generation energy efficiency policies, some of the cost benefits of energy efficiency, and options for state policymakers. We'll also be exploring some of the findings by the Research Assistance Regulatory Assistance Project, looking at how states can cost-effectively meet 30% of their electricity needs with efficiency over the next 10 years, which is a level far higher than most state targets currently are looking at. I also wanted to mention that the webinar is being recorded, and we will be sending out a link to the webinar recording and presentations on NCSL's website, and we should be sending that out within 5 days or so. Also, I wanted to mention that the presenters will be answering questions at the end of their presentations, so feel free to type questions in the question box on the right-hand side of your screen at any time during the webinar. So to begin, we'd like to launch our first polling question, which you can answer when it appears on your screen. And basically what we're interested in knowing is, did your state consider energy efficiency legislation this session? Just to get a gauge on activity and what you're seeing in your state relative to our other attendees. All right, I think we can close that poll and let's see what the results are. So, as you can see, energy efficiency is an extremely relevant topic at this point, and there's a huge role for state policy and a huge amount of action. And I think our presenters will really explore what some of those opportunities are and how states what things they may wish to consider as they are exploring new opportunities and policy options. So our first presenter I'd like to welcome today is Johanna Zetterberg, who is the coordinator of the State Energy Efficiency Action Network at the U.S. Department of Energy. Johanna supports states implementing policy and program initiatives to increase investments in energy efficiency through the State Energy Program and the State Energy Efficiency Action Network. So let's welcome Johanna Zetterberg.
Thank you, Glenn, and I'm very glad to be here today. Thanks to NCSL for the invitation and for putting on this webinar. Very interesting to see those poll results, so I hope this is a good discussion today. And make sure that I can operate the slides here. There. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you today about some resources from the SEA Action Network and also from the U.S. Department of Energy that can support states in using energy efficiency as part of really any number of planning efforts in the energy and environment space. First, just a word on SEA Action. State and Local Energy Efficiency Action Network is a professional network facilitated by DOE and EPA. We have about 200 or so thought leaders and state and local leaders and efficiency experts within the network, and we provide support for state and local policymakers and program administrators on making efficiency happen and bringing the benefits of the resource to their constituents. We have created a very rich library of guidance documents for state and local governments on policy design and implementation and program design and implementation in the topical areas that you see on the right-hand side of this slide, which are really the biggest areas of both opportunity and challenge for advancing energy efficiency. So I hope after this webinar you'll take a moment to go to our website and check out our library of guidance documents. Hopefully there's something there that would be helpful to you. So today I'd like to just discuss very briefly why energy efficiency. I want to introduce a concept of energy efficiency pathways, which is an organizing framework for thinking about bundles of energy efficiency policies and programs that can achieve specific objectives. I'd like to touch base quickly on the energy efficiency potential that DOE sees across the country. And then the bulk of my presentation will be on looking at energy efficiency pathways in state plans and the resources created by C-Action and DOE to support that. So first, why energy efficiency? Hopefully many of you have your own answer to this, which does vary across the states. But what I like to say is that it yields a lot of policy bang for the buck. Basically, you can choose any reason to do efficiency, and it can help you meet many policy needs. It is a very low-cost energy resource. It typically costs about half as much as a new supply. Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory published a paper recently that found the energy efficiency was about 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour, and this compares to a U.S. national average retail price of about 10 cents per kilowatt hour. So a big difference there. And I should note that this figure, the 4.5 cents, is all cost over all savings nationally. Of course, energy efficiency also reduces all types of power plant related emissions. It can increase economic development, and it can lower overall consumption on transmission and distribution systems. So the question, I guess, really isn't why efficiency, but why not efficiency. I should change that. So introducing the pathways concept here, I will be referencing these pathways later on in my presentation, but these are the streams of activities that can result in real energy and cost savings. So we have ratepayer funded efficiency programs. These are the utility delivered or third-party program administrator delivered energy efficiency, industrial efficiency, combined heat and power, energy savings performance contracting, building energy codes, and city-led efficiency. And the city-led efficiency here, for our purposes in creating the support materials that we've made available, is really things like benchmarking and disclosure and other building performance policies that we see cities really taking the lead on across the country now. I just want to call your attention to the photo in the lower left corner, the ESPC photo. This is a great story. It's actually a U.S. Army Engineering and Support Center in South Carolina that received a check for almost $800,000 from their utility, a rebate check. And this was a result of successful energy savings initiatives under the utility's Energy Wise for Business program. So those folks were quite happy to receive their $800,000 rebate check there. Next slide. So DOE did sort of a back of the envelope look at what the potential could be across the country in a couple of decades from these pathways. And you see here that there is a very significant amount of energy savings that currently are on the table to be gotten. And what's really interesting here is if you take the example of the ratepayer funded efficiency programs, that low-end number of 645 million megawatt hours is equal to the 2013 retail electricity sales of New Mexico and California and Texas combined. And the high end there of 895 is all of those states plus New York and Michigan. So once again, very significant potential, and that's just in the utility-delivered efficiency space alone. There is some overlap among these pathways, so we do like to acknowledge that. Just wanted to put up here a few examples. This is not an exhaustive list of the importance of the state legislatures in supporting energy efficiency. Based on those poll results, it looks like many of you are well aware, but just wanted to put a few items up here. Building codes, retrofits of public buildings and facilities, setting efficiency targets for utilities, enabling the use of ESPCs, and supporting the use of combined heated power. DOE is working on doing some state-level analysis now of potential, efficiency potential. And we did release our first report under this series looking at the technical potential of combined heat and power at the state level. I put the link to the report in this slide, and at the end of the report in an appendix, there's actually a state-by-state profile of the technical potential of CHP that DOE's analysis determined. So more will be coming soon, and we'll be happy to share those with Glenn for distribution out to the membership when they're available. So once again, coming back to this back of the envelope calculation, DOE just also took a look at the existing energy efficiency potentials that have been done at state and utility service territory levels. We just were interested to see if there was a, sort of a range of efficiency potential that these studies identify. And sure enough, there is. You can see those two high bars in the middle between about 1 to 2.5%. So once again, this is just underscoring the point that there is a lot of potential here. And once again, this is just in the ratepayer funded space. We do have all of the reports that we looked at on the website, which I will show you in just a few minutes if you're interested in looking at any state in particular. Just wanted to show an illustrative chart here that these pathways can stack on each other and be additive and really get you pretty far. Once again, this is illustrative only, but the idea is just conceptually to understand that over time you can bring in new pathways, you can add to the initial set that you do, and really get a lot of benefit there. So when C-Action, switching between C-Action and DOE a lot here, sorry about that, but these resources are very complementary. So when C-Action first thought about how to create something that would be useful for state leaders, we thought about what the questions would be that could come up within stakeholder discussions. And so we came up with this list here. How does the pathway work? What are its benefits? Is it cost effective? Who's doing it? What are they achieving? What are some examples of the pathway in action? What policy actions are required to support the pathway? What does it take to implement? What are the best practices and who are doing those best practices? How are savings documented? And what support is available if I'm interested in learning more about this pathway? So we tried to answer some of these questions in a document that you see here, the C-Action Guide for States, Energy Efficiency as a Least Cost Strategy to Reduce Greenhouse Gases and Air Pollution and Meet Energy Needs in the Power Sector. This report is available now online. I like to think of it as the very high 30,000-foot view of the pathways. This is a fairly lengthy document. It's over 100 pages, but it's incredibly accessible and easy to read. We created it really for the air regulator community, but also other state agencies and state leaders with whom the air directors need to be in touch for the purposes of planning efforts. So this On the right here, you see just a basic outline of the paper. In the beginning, the paper discusses some fundamentals about energy efficiency, the fact that it can address multiple pollutants, it's an established energy resource, and it saves money and is cost effective. The paper then goes into approaches for documenting energy savings and emissions reductions. We have a brief chapter on practical considerations, such as intergovernmental coordination and the importance of having a skilled workforce in place who can deliver the planned levels of energy efficiency savings because they know how to do the job well. And then the bulk of the paper is on each pathway I discussed earlier. And so within each of these pathway chapters, we provide a definition or a description of the pathway, the policies that provide a foundation for successful implementation of the pathway. We share some brief case studies, who's doing these pathways, why, what they're getting out of them. We have methods for estimating and determining energy savings that are pathway specific. And then we share an expected range of energy savings and emissions reduction based on what states are actually seeing. And then finally, the paper covers some energy efficiency programs for low-income communities that are demonstrating good results. So complementary to that 30,000-foot view, DOE took each pathway and created a couple of presentations to support states further. So the first set of presentations seeks to answer the question, what it will look like to actually include, this pathway in my state's climate or energy plan. And so those short presentations are a summary of some of the key points in that See Action Larger Pathways paper. The second set of presentations, and that's on the right here, provides very detailed information on the support that DOE has made available through its programs for states in pursuing these pathways. So both sets of presentations are available on a website that I will show you the link of very shortly here. And I'll note that the presentations on the left also include some key information on cost effectiveness of each of those pathways. For example, building energy codes are a very cost-effective investment in energy efficiency. The adoption costs are primarily salaried employees who manage the code adoption process, and the compliance costs are borne by local government and supported by permit fees. DOE actually provides each state an estimate of the expected cost savings resulting from the adoption of each new published model code. And just to pull one example, the energy cost savings from adopting the 2015 code for Indiana were estimated to be on the order of nearly $240 million annually by 2030. Other information that DOE has made available is a reference presentation on energy modeling. It covers the basics of power sector capacity expansion modeling and briefly touches on the other types of modeling and analytical tools available. So if that's something that you're interested in, please go ahead and take a look at that presentation. And then we also have some information on an EM&V resource portal that See Action put together. There are many questions on EM&V, and so we try to pull together what the resources are that states are actually using and have relied on in recent years. So we do have all of that information in one place on the See Action website. So the information I've shared so far can be found on the first two websites here. I encourage you to check them out, bookmark them if they're helpful to you. We have a website that has the presentations here that I went over at the top, and then the See Action Network website. And finally, I just would like to let you know about the DOE Technical Assistance Portal, energy.gov/TA. This is a single point of entry that can help you basically avoid the bureaucracy of DOE and get a quick answer to a question, we have a multiple office team who reviews questions that come in through this website and will act as a switchboard operator and get it to the right place. So here I just want to show you screenshots of each of these websites. This is the first one I showed you. This is the C-Action website. And here is the DOE portal. Well, thank you for your time. I'm going to wrap up here. I will just show you very briefly that when Glenn sends out this slide deck, I've included some additional slides pulled from some of those presentations I went over, just showing what the state and local policymaking role is that can support each of those pathways. So if you're interested in that more detailed information, that is contained in the presentation decks. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Johanna. That was very enlightening, and I'm sure, as you've noticed, there is a tremendous amount of resources and support available from the Department of Energy when it comes to energy efficiency. Again, I'd want to remind folks to type their questions in the question box on the right-hand side, and our presenters will be happy to answer those questions at the end of their presentations. So I'd like to take a few moments to launch our second polling question, which you can answer when it appears on the screen. And I wanted to mention, obviously we've had a lot of activities, as you've noticed, and we're interested in finding out what is the top reason for being interested in energy efficiency, or what is your top reason for, say, attending this webinar, and what are your interests in energy efficiency? So we'll give you a few minutes to, or a few seconds, 30 seconds to answer the poll. Thanks. Okay, I think that's long enough. I think we can close that poll and take a look at the results. So it's quite interesting. So lowering customer costs was second, just closely behind meeting air quality requirements, which, as you may already know and probably do, energy efficiency is one of the least cost approaches for reducing emissions. And obviously the grid resiliency issue is a prime concern. The energy demand and economic growth are a little lower, but they're also very important concerns as well. I wanted to add that states have been quite active in that we've actually had 38 states in 2016 that have introduced energy efficiency legislation. And in fact, introducing nearly 300 bills on energy efficiency. So hopefully these resources will be helpful in guiding you as you further investigate energy efficiency policy. And our next presenter, I think Rich, will also be very helpful and informative. Rich Sedano is the Director of the Regulatory Assistance Project's U.S. programs. He advises state commissions and other decision makers, often working with them in workshop settings on energy efficiency, demand response, renewable energy, pricing, smart grid, transmission, and wholesale electric issues. Mr. Sedano is also engaged in several projects that address the power sector of the future. And in December 2012, he was elected to RAP's Board of Directors. So let's welcome Rich Sedano.
Thanks, Glenn, and glad to be here and glad to be on a program with Johanna and to be able to talk with state legislators and staff about energy efficiency. I want to explain that we have had a sense for a long time at we call ourselves RAP, that at RAP we feel that there's been a lot of improvements in the ways that energy efficiency has been going in the United States, but that there's still quite a lot of room for improvement. And so we launched a project last year that suggested that we wanted to articulate a reasonable stretch goal and change the frame of how we think about energy efficiency from more of a short-term resource acquisition to more of a longer-term strategic resource. And so we have a report that's the name of my presentation also, meeting 30% of energy needs with energy efficiency within 10 years, a quantum leap in energy efficiency. So, so I'm going to be talking to you about this. Then I think Johanna still has the mouse, so I can't advance the slides right now. I want to just point out that we launched this work and we did it with the Energy Futures Group, and so they are important collaborators with us in creating this work. Well, what we do, and I'll show you some of our resources at the end, I do want to also say that the C-Action Library and its predecessor, the National Action Plan for Energy Efficiency Library, is really terrific and has a lot of great stuff. I see the mouse is coming to me, but it's not quite here yet. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start talking and look at the mouse and see if it gets to my control panel. We think, first of all, why 30%? We think that a big number for energy efficiency is reasonable. If Gretchen, if you're going to be controlling the slides, I'm now going to be on slide 5. This slide, my 5th slide. A reasonable stretch goal for energy efficiency is an important thing to have. Efficiency is such an important resource. You can go to the next slide. And there's a lot of potential for additional end-use savings all across the economy, and that measures that are able to be installed can persist for a long time. And it is important to consider all the values of energy efficiency. I think Johanna alluded to this, and I will too again. And it's also important for regulation to be open to the best ideas, to new ideas for how to organize programs and motivate program administrators. So we can go to the next slide. And the analysis that we did was really a top-down analysis. Johanna talked about potential studies, which is a very end-use, detail-driven analysis. Our approach was to look at what utilities and other program administrators are doing with energy efficiency and examine whether there are better practices that are available, and to talk about how much better we think results can be if those better practices are implemented. And we used our own judgment for that. We also interviewed many people. And so in that way, we I think, come up with an analysis that is useful for policy people and accessible for policy people. Our report is just 24 pages, and it covers a lot of ground in a relatively high-level way. So we can go to the next slide. And this shows some information about how potential studies are reporting results. It's kind of similar to Johanna, that the results in a couple of states, Massachusetts shown here, significantly outpace the potential studies that we see in going on in many states across the country. And so our sense is that with better methods, better practices, there can be better results. Go to the next slide. And let's talk about the current best practice. Move on. Best practices are getting better. You can see here, looking back several years, that what we thought was the best results have been blown away by by many states in recent years. So the best practices are getting significantly better. And the next slide shows that if we think of our goals as 30% savings over 10 years, we're already with the work in these leading states 2/3 of the way there, and that a stretch goal can push us further. So we can go to the next slide. And one question is whether the leading states today, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, are special cases. And there are some things about the New England states that are different from everywhere else. But our view is that the fundamentals are consistent across the rest of the country, that there are the cost of incremental investments are high, and that every place is facing air quality issues. There are many consistencies across the country, and that if the ideas that we're talking about are implemented, then significant increases in energy efficiency can be justified across the country. So we can go on to the next slide and talk. We're going to move into talking about where are the opportunities for improvements. And so in the next slide, two areas that we looked at in some depth is combined heat and power, which Johanna also mentioned, and conservation voltage reduction. Both of these represent using less energy at the building, at the end user. With combined heat and power, the industrial user is going to substitute a more efficient system and use less BTUs on site. Conservation voltage reduction, which is enabled further by smart grid technology. A lower voltage is allowed on a distribution line while securing the necessary reliability, because there's more awareness of what voltage is doing at any given time. So the very large margin for error that is normally used can be smaller. And so significant savings, 2% from or more from each of these, can be produced, and that can add to our total to push end use efficiency higher. We can go on to the next slide. There's a lot of new technology that's going into buildings today. It's really quite amazing how fast that's happening. The Internet of Things is coming, is being accompanied by much more efficient technologies. We noted with great interest the fact that the Northwest Power and Conservation Council's 7th Power Plan, they do these plans every 5 years, indicates that a lot of energy efficiency savings that they're anticipating over the next 5 years was not in the last plan, that the entirely new kinds of savings are now available. And so this suggests that the technology, the practice of finding energy efficiency is changing very, very fast. We certainly know that the opportunity from new technology is not zero. The other big thing that I want you to take away from this slide is the idea that electrification of thermal and transportation end uses. So this is electric cars, this is heat pumps replacing fossil fuel for thermal heating and cooling. These kinds of things are likely to cause fewer BTUs, fewer energy units to be used. And the question for regulators, for government, keeping score on energy efficiency is how to count these kinds of savings. These are different. In fact, in many cases, electricity use may go up from transitioning to these electrified end uses, but energy use may go down. And so finding ways to credit these kinds of changes, electrification changes, comes along with the opportunities that new technology offers. You can go to the next slide. there are a lot of new technologies that are going to allow for the possibility, the probability that energy efficiency measures that have gone in previous years can be changed out now or soon with better technology, and that change out can still be cost effective. So the idea of energy efficiency savings being evergreen, I think, is a powerful one. You can go on to the next slide. We've thought a lot about the ways that program administrators deliver services, and here are a few thoughts about how those can be improved. One of them, I don't have a special slide for, is strategic energy management, which is something that means something to energy efficiency people. It focuses on large commercial and industrial customers and works with them on how their entire facility is using energy and considers revamping ways that they do things in a manner to save energy and potentially also make improvements in their production. The next slide talks about upstream and midstream incentives. What upstream incentives means is programs that work not on the ultimate end user, but on stores or manufacturers. Midstream suggests stores and maybe using stores as a funnel for focusing energy efficiency programs, helping them with supplying and stocking and other tactics to motivate their customers to choose the energy efficiency choice. And upstream means going back to manufacturers and urging them in ways, perhaps with incentives, to produce more energy efficient items. And Pacific Gas and Electric has been doing this for quite some time with their heating, ventilation, and cooling program. The next slide talks about deep dives in Vermont's snow gun promotion, which has dramatically dropped the cost of ski area energy in Vermont over the course of years by virtue of improving the energy efficiency of the snow guns. And so these targeted, laser-focused efforts at changing end uses is a really important approach. The next slide turns attention to policy of hopefully some significant interest to this audience. The next slide talks about what it costs to get the customer to say yes to energy efficiency. And there is a cost to that. And one point I really want to make here is that customers who are motivated to do energy efficiency are still going to do their own back-of-the-envelope calculation on their own benefit cost, and that's as it should be. The concern for policy people is that from a societal perspective, there's a different benefit cost calculation. Many other benefits are accrued to the economy, to air quality, to many other places in society, and there's no one there to pay for that unless general ratepayers pay for that. And that's why in states that have a societal cost test approach or a total resource cost test approach, more energy efficiency can be justified than if we just focus on the effects on utilities. So this idea that the screening tests is important is so important. That's going to be another slide on it soon. But what that justifies is more money for energy efficiency. And it is important to keep in mind that it's the total cost of service, the total drain on the economy from using electricity that matters here. Certainly rates matter also, but sometimes the balance in the conversation is to devalue the total cost and bills to customers. So a thorough assessment of economic trade-offs is is important to secure the incremental benefits from energy efficiency that accrue to society, not just the participants. Next slide also addresses the profitability to utilities. The motivation of utilities here is very important, and there's a lot of work now being done to consider performance incentives and how they can be motivational for utilities, not just for achieving energy efficiency. There's a lot of states that do that, and that's good. But also to think about what is it that energy efficiency accomplishes. Energy efficiency, for example, reduces line losses, which reduces costs. Or energy efficiency reduces emissions, which reduces the cost of air quality compliance. So performance incentives that are more strategic can be very important, as well as making sure that utilities are not motivated through they're regulated to just drive more sales. Next slide suggests focusing on long-term perspectives. Energy efficiency does serve long-term goals, so a focus on near-term resources that just focus on first-year savings devalues the fact that we really are making long-term investments that can substitute for long-term utility investments in poles and wires and generation. The other point here is to ask the question whether we care about net purposes, net results. Net results are important because we want to know that the actual results of our spending attributed to the utility programs are being counted, and that's an important thing for consumer advocates. But from a broad picture point of view, societal results are important too. And so considering both net results that assure that we assure that the dollars are well spent is important, but also gross results that suggest how the state is doing in managing its energy challenges is also important. Next slide talks about the screening process that I talked about before. It's important to value all the benefits from energy efficiency, and the practices in many states do not do that. So if all the benefits are not included, then energy efficiency won't be valued. The next slide talks about market transformation. Market transformation is another idea that suggests that we can be doing a lot of things with energy efficiency programs, not just paying for near-term resources and near-term actions by customers, but actually changing the way people behave and the way markets work. So it suggests that the way we keep score in a one-year kind of approach may not fully value the actual transformation of markets. And I very often hear concerns about whether energy efficiency does transform markets. And I think the answer is, well, it certainly can, but if regulation doesn't motivate that, then those aren't the programs that you're likely to get. The next slide suggests that it is important generally to think about the big picture here, to think about larger objectives and to worry not so much about the details of counting how to adjust energy efficiency results for net results, but rather to think about overall policy results and that you can see from a statewide perspective. The next slide is a suggestion to be creative in regulation, to consider new models for acquiring resources, whether it's through competition or through changing the expectations for utilities and then holding them to that. And the last point focuses on electrification again and wanting to keep score for how electrification is producing savings. The next slide is a reminder, as Johanna did, to consider codes and standards, very economical approach to achieving energy efficiency, and a reminder also about financing, and to include financing in the portfolio, but not to over-rely on it. And the next slide is really an exhortation to find the ways to do better than we're doing now, and to reach that 30% number. The savings do accumulate over time to really making a significant difference, and having this longer-term look helps you see that. And finally, we want you to see that RAP has a few, in the last slide, RAP has some resources here too. Our most recent report from this graphic is from the cover and summarizes the 8 ways to get across to big energy efficiency savings, that value all these benefits, to set lifetime goals, to pursue all cost-effective efficiency, reward market transformation, ensure utility profitability through energy efficiency. Regulation focuses on the big picture issues. Be creative in regulation and focus on codes and standards. And we have a couple of other publications here that I wanted to note. And with that, I'll close. Thank you for your attention.
That's great. Well, thank you, Rich. It was very informative and enlightening, I must say, and want to encourage our attendees, if they have any questions for Rich or Johanna, to please type them into the question box on the right-hand side of the screen, and we will have those answered for you. I do have actually a question here, and I guess this is for either Rich or Johanna. Does a regulated versus a deregulated market influence what sort of savings potential there might be, or the type of policy approach that policymakers may want to consider?
Well, I'll give that a go. One of the things about a fully regulated or vertically integrated system is that the utility can internalize all of the system benefits from energy efficiency, including being able to manage its generation fleet better. And so that can sometimes be helpful, but even in deregulated markets with RTOs, there can still be ways to value the same quantities. So while there are some distinctions, overall it's really not a difference. The same categories of savings can be measured and included in the assessment of efficiency programs.
Great, and I guess there's another question rolled in here. Obviously, there's a variation looking at the more aggressive states on energy efficiency. Is there a regional variation or reason for that? Does energy mix, for some reason, potentially play a role in that? Or whether there's more investment, say, in grid modernization or smart grid efforts, or what might you attribute some of those regional variations, or is it mainly a factor of how much electricity costs? So higher priced electricity markets might have more aggressive efficiency approaches.
Well, I'll go for that too. I think that I worked in Vermont state government for a long time, and now work with governments around the country with RAP. And what I see, I think, is a matter of urgency and prioritization of energy efficiency, both in statutes and in the attitudes of public officials in the higher cost states. But that's different from whether energy efficiency is valuable. And so if it's promoted as an urgent matter in the higher cost states, and that produces more results, that might cause a lot of the regional differences that we see in results. But if we look forward, if you look at what is likely to happen in the power sector between now and 10 or 15 years from now, all of the country is facing similar kinds of cost pressures. And so when we look at the avoided costs, what screening results are producing, there's a lot of significant efficiency that's available everywhere, we think. And one indicator for that is the way Minnesota has raised its energy efficiency objectives from a level that was already pretty high to a level that's even higher now. I think it's more about being strategic and recognizing that it's important to fully value energy efficiency than any change in the underlying value in energy efficiency.
Okay, and then we had another question actually, and this is for Johanna really, with regards to potential technical assistance. What are the options that states might have with regards to taking advantage of that technical assistance? As in, what are the specific types of support that DOE might be able to offer, whether it's kind of looking at a market and opportunities, or is it also looking at which policies might be best leverage efficiencies?
Sorry, you cut off there. Can you repeat the last example?
Yeah, looking at looking at which policies. Is there also kind of support at looking at which policies or approaches would best leverage efficiency opportunities in specific regions or markets?
Sure. Yes, those would be great questions for us to get. I mean, typically the type of assistance that we would provide would be information, analysis, subject matter expertise, and it's just a matter of finding the right connection within DOE. I would also be happy to just be in touch with anyone directly if you don't want to go through a website. My contact information was at the end of that slide. But there would be a few different ways that we could help answer a question like that.
Okay, great. And actually, we just have, unless we get another question. So again, if you have any burning questions, please enter those in the question box. Otherwise, we just have one more, and this question goes around the. Obviously, there's a cost, although it's a lower cost, but assessing who pays for various efficiency programs has been, I guess, controversial in some states about which, if it might be industrial consumers or are different consumers getting more support or value when it comes to the way the efficiency programs are implemented. And if either of you have thoughts on best approaches for assessing those the value stream and actually the payment for the program.
Well, Glenn, there's a lot of layers in that simple question. I think, first of all, trying to be sure from a distributional perspective that efficiency is available to all customers is one important place to start. If all customers have the opportunity to engage in programs, then they can take some control over their energy bills through participating in energy efficiency investments. But then the question is not just who pays, but also how the benefits work, and that starts to raise the question of what are the electric rates, and are the electric rates signaling value? And I think there's a general consensus that flat rates, the same kilowatt hour rate all the time, is not a really strong signal to customers. But then the consensus breaks down on what to do about it, so we stay in the status quo. And so if customers were charged something more like the way the value of electricity goes, where during higher cost times they pay more and during lower cost times they pay less, then there would be motivation for customers to take action to avoid consumption during high cost times, and everyone would benefit from that because everyone would avoid those higher costs, not just the participating customers. The utility wouldn't have to make these investments. So there's a lot to this, but I think the bottom line is that if energy efficiency is cost effective for the whole system, then it's going to save the whole system costs, and everyone will benefit from that. The participants will benefit more, obviously, because they're actually taking the step, but everyone else will too, since the utility will avoid building transmission lines or generation or other things that would no longer be needed.
Well, great. Well, on that note, we will conclude the webinar, and I really want to thank our speakers for taking the time to join us and share their knowledge with us. And all those resources that they have mentioned are, we will have, if links are not available in the presentations that we will have posted online, we will send those out. I wanted to add that we will have a recording of this, and we should have it up and send that email out to you within 5 days or so. Additionally, NCSL does track efficiency activities, and we have a great database where you can find out what exactly is going on, which bills have been introduced. It's updated weekly, and on energy efficiency and basically any other energy topic you may be interested in. And we do have resources as well on a variety of energy efficiency issues available on our website. So hopefully you will join us for our next email, and thank you again for joining. Have a great day.